Something's brewing.
What you're about to see is a clip from my podcast, Something's Brewing with DannyNines, now available anywhere you get your podcasts, so be sure to check it out and like and subscribe to the YouTube channel for more. Enjoy the video. The Oscars are irrelevant pretty much. Last Sunday we got the Oscars, and this is the first year in a very long time that I didn't even watch it. I couldn't have cared about it any less. I forgot it was even on, and it sucks because I do really like Conan, so it would have been cool to see him hosting it, but none of the movies were interesting to me. Not a single one of them. Years past, we got like Birdman. What else did we get? Birdman was probably one of my favorites of all time. La La Land, great movie. You get movies like In Bruges or Banshees of Inisherin, movies like that. I love that stuff. The Oscars are great. Moonlight, dude. That's a good movie. I mean, I could just, I'm going to do this the whole episode where I just say a random movie name because it was an Oscar thing. Tropic Thunder, dude. Robert Downey Jr., Tropic Thunder. Come on now. Dark Knight. Even though those movies are garbage, Heath Ledger's performance was amazing. But yeah, so we got the Oscars, and it was just uninteresting to me. The one thing that I did see from the Oscars that was somewhat interesting to me is Kieran Culkin winning an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor in a Movie. Now look, I watched the movie A Real Pain, in which he won that award for. I watched that movie expecting great things. So we'll get into. I want to break that movie down actually. All right, let me digress for a second. So the Oscars, couldn't care about it any less. There was no interesting movies. The one movie that we did have that was somewhat interesting, A Real Pain, I watched this past week, and I don't think that it was Oscar worthy at all. If you put any movie or anybody in these categories from this year in a past year, it's laughable. It's genuinely laughable. I think that what the Oscars need to start doing is adding in more movies that people actually watch. I didn't hear about The Brutalist, which is a shame because I do really like Adrian Brody, and I'm happy he won an Oscar, another one. I genuinely didn't hear about that movie until the Oscars, until I looked up like what movies were nominated for stuff. Timothy Chalamet getting nominated for whatever that Tim Dillon movie is that he did. I mean, cool. I'm happy for him, but biopics typically don't win stuff. And I definitely don't care about a biopic like that because every time I've seen one, they've just been completely wrong, or they only focus on the good stuff. And apparently this was like faithful to Tim Dillon's life and stuff. But if I'm being honest, dude, I don't even really know who Tim Dillon is. I couldn't name you a song. If you played me a Tim Dillon song right now, I wouldn't even know it. Yeah, I mean, honestly, just nothing was good at the Oscars this year. They need to start adding in movies that we care about. You're telling me right now that movies that came out this past year couldn't be found that were decent enough to compete with these movies? I mean, it's diabolical, honestly. So a couple of my favorite movies, so obviously from this past year specifically, there wasn't much that came out. So you can't really hinder them for that. You got the writer's strike like 2 years ago or whatever. So not a big deal. These Oscars were whatever. But previous years, there's been movies that for sure should have been nominated or for sure should have won something, and then they didn't. Like Brendan Fraser won that one year for The Whale, but you had Colin Farrell for Banshees of Inisherin up. You had Brandon Gleeson and Barry Keoghan up for that same year, and they didn't win it. It was like, I can't remember the movie, but it was awful. And I'm not going to fact check myself on this because I know that I'm right, because I'm always fucking right. No, I'm just kidding. The Oscars, though, they're bumming it, and I'm not about it. So anyway, A Real Pain. Now, I watched this movie, like I said, expecting great things. And if this is any, any indication of the Oscars being terrible, this movie is it. So Kieran Culkin, if you just took him out of the movie and put his performance up against Heath Ledger or any supporting actor winner ever, it's not close. It's not even close. And listen, I hate to be the guy that's talking shit. I only want to do it when it's absolutely necessary or whenever I think that things are getting a little out of hand. And with this, something's getting out of hand, bro. I can't tell you how terrible this movie was. I had such good feelings from watching the trailer, and then the movie starts. I thought it was going to be like a buddy comedy flick, and then I hear he won an Oscar. So I was like, what? So I watched the trailer again, and I'm like, okay, let's check it out. I watched this movie. I don't know if the director, Marty McDonagh, has gotten my head or something, but this movie should have ended way more brutally than it did. So in the movie, you just get two cousins who are estranged for a while, whose grandma lived in Poland, passes away, so they go on this trip to Poland to visit, concentration camps. They're Jewish, obviously, and visit Poland and just where she used to live and all this stuff. And the whole time, you get one guy who's kind of uptight, but like barely says anything in Jesse Eisenberg. He just is a little weird and quirky. And then you get Kieran McCulkin, who at the very beginning of the movie, I told my wife when we were watching it, I was like, either he is going to commit suicide, has tried to commit suicide, or this movie's terrible. And then immediately, not immediately, like 4 or 5 minutes in, they're like, he tried to kill himself because he's just being a weirdo the whole movie. And he's like very like bipolar, but they don't explain any of that. The whole movie, you're reading into his emotions in the roller coaster of emotions that he's on. You're feeling the estranged concept between the two cousins, his outbursts, his depression, the fact that they're in this really sad area. Like, you're feeling all these things for him, and it's terrible. But you never really I don't know, because his emotions are so erratic, they almost don't make sense for the scenes that they're happening in. And when he does have an outburst, it's kind of like, that's a stupid thing to be in the movie, to be an outburst. And then Jesse Eisenberg has this good monologue, but I mean, I'm just not convinced on him being like a emotional actor. Every time I've seen him in something, he's kind of like, I don't want to say distilled because I don't know if that's the right word, but kind of just like not there. For instance, The Social Network, like that's Jesse Eisenberg all the time. Even in those zombie movies that he's in with Woody Harrelson, he's kind of like just bland. I don't know if it's his face or like the Mark Zuckerberg thing, or I don't know what it is. But anyway, he has this monologue and it's just fine. It's just fine. He goes into like how Kieran McCulkin tried to kill himself or whatever with sleeping pills after Graham died and blah, blah, blah. And then they cut to and Kieran McCulkin's just bop-a-da-ba-da playing on the piano. And then Jesse Eisenberg is like over it, so he goes to the hotel. And then they kind of allude to Kieran McCulkin sleeping with the one lady on the tour or whatever. Anyway, the movie's just nothing. It's just a bunch of nothing. And it's like this weird, you're just seeing weird. It's definitely like so scripted. Like it's not, the feelings that you're getting in the scenes that they're in is just, it's not natural. Nothing feels natural about this movie whatsoever. It feels like you know how when you watch a movie, sometimes you're so lost in it that like you're with these characters, you're feeling what they're feeling, you're along for the ride, you forget about your phone, you forget that you got kids at home, you forget what you ate for breakfast, like you're just in the movie. And sometimes you forget that you're watching a movie because you're such a part of it, and in the writing and directing and everything's so good about it and the acting that you're in there. With this movie, the whole time I'm like, this doesn't even feel like a real thing. This feels like I'm watching a YouTube video or something. Like this feels like I just wasn't in it at all. And I felt so bad because I wanted to like it so much. And it like got nominated for that Oscar or whatever, but I just wasn't vibing on it at all. And then 20, 30 minutes before the end of the movie, I was like, oh shit, this movie's so bland and there's nothing happening in this entire movie. We could get an amazing ending here. Think back to a movie like Stranger Than Fiction with Will Ferrell and Maggie Gyllenhaal. That movie rips. That movie is about a character named Harold Crick who gets a voice in his head who's, telling him about his day or whatever. And then you go to find out that the person that he's hearing in his head is an author who writes stories about people with just bland lives who their lives start to get slightly better and better, and then they die tragically. So I was like, oh my God, this movie's just bland. There's a bunch of nothing, and he's going to die at the end. Like, Kieran McCulkin is winning an Oscar because at the end of the movie, he's going to kill himself at Graham's apartment in Poland in front of his cousin, and it'll be a fucking shocker. And he'll be like, you should have been there for me and you weren't. Bam, blow his brains out or something, or like hang himself, or like something at the end of the movie was going to be tragic where you were like, ooh, it all wrapped up and felt like a nice little bow on top. Obviously, that didn't happen. And it sucks because in my mind, while I'm watching this film, I'm seeing it in my head. I'm seeing the final scene of the movie. They get to Graham's house. They go inside. They're like allowed to tour it for some weird reason. Like nobody lives there and the landlord's like showing the place, something like that. They go inside and Kieran McCulkin, boom, ends it right there. Cuz finds him. Jesse Eisenberg finds him. And then the movie just ends with Jesse Eisenberg on a plane by himself, listening to his kid's audio that he was listening to at the beginning of the movie. If that happened, the movie's infinitely better. It's still not great, but it's better. And I'm wondering if either A, that was the ending, because the ending of the movie is nothing. The whole movie's nothing. And then the ending is just they give each other hugs and Kieran McCulkin stays in the airport and Jesse Eisenberg goes home. And it's just Kieran McCulkin staring off into the distance at the end. I imagine it was supposed to feel like the fucking time or the top spinning at the end of Inception or something, where you're like, ooh, is he homeless? Does he live here? Is he crazy? Like, what's up? But you didn't get any of that. There was no indication that this guy was out of his mind. Sure, he had a bipolar emotional swings, but it was very minimal. This movie would have been so much cooler if he ended it at the end of the movie, because it would have actually, like, the movie would have meant something. The movie would have been like, don't leave your boys behind. You got a cousin that you're close with, your Graham died, and you left your family. Don't do that shit because it might have an emotional and mental effect on somebody. But instead of doing anything worthwhile, they just ended the movie. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And then the movie ended, and I literally looked at my wife, and I was like, that was the worst thing I've ever seen. And now that's dramatic. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen. It was... I'll never watch it again. But when we're talking about Oscar movies versus this movie, like, Birdman is an amazing movie. 12 Years a Slave is an emotional roller coaster. It's an amazing, like, that's a movie that you see once every couple of years and you're shocked every fucking time. I just don't understand what the whole point of that movie was and why people are so hyped on it, and it got an Oscar. It won a fucking Oscar, people. This is what I mean. The Oscars mean nothing. They mean nothing anymore. And yeah, if I ever got nominated for an Oscar or like some big award like that, and some idiot on a podcast was saying how it means nothing, I'd be like, this guy's a fucking loser. I have an Oscar for a thing I did, and I make millions of dollars. I understand that. But that's my perspective, and that's why we're all here. And I just don't see it. I'm sorry. Nothing about the movie was good. And then it has like a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes or something. And I'm like, what are these people fucking watching? That movie, A Real Pain, has a 90 or like an 80 something or 90 something percent on Rotten Tomatoes. When I looked the day I saw it, I think it was an 89%. And then you go look at a great movie like, I don't know, Constantine's a great movie. Sure, it's not an Oscar nod, but if we're talking about low budget good movies, what the fuck? What are we talking about? That's a way. If you're putting two movies in front of me, I'd rather watch Constantine. You put a Marvel movie in front of me, and I'm watching that over A Real Pain every day of the week. I just don't understand it. And then you get these critics just bombing the shit out of movies that are genuinely good and that cost a lot of money and there's a lot of people working on. And then you get a little indie flick like this that's boring as all fuck, and it gets Oscar nods and shit. Now, I love little indie small movies. My favorite director of all time is Marty McDonagh. Martin McDonagh, he did In Bruges, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, Banshees of Inisherin. He did a short film called Six Shooter, which I love. I mean, he's done great stuff. Seven Psychopaths is really, really good too. He did that. And then you give this movie a go, and you're like, how the fuck is this even a thing, dude? Ugh. Anyway, spoiler warning for Real Pain. Don't go watch it because it's fucking not worth your time. That's the video. Thanks for watching it. Be sure to like and subscribe for more stuff on my YouTube channel. And if you want to see the rest of that conversation, check out my podcast, anywhere podcasts are found. Something's Brewing with DannyNines. It's been great. It's been real. It's been fun. I'll see you next time. Peace.